to Satsang. So beautiful to be together with you all. We'll start as always with one of our questions that comes from our online audience, and then open it up to any questions that anyone here has. How to deal with people's expectations, especially from our close ones. How to deal with people's expectations, especially from our close ones. That's asked by Tavleen, joining us on Instagram. One of the truths and challenges of life is we don't actually have any control over anyone else's thoughts or emotions. And the more that we try to change how other people think or how they feel, the more depressed and frustrated we become. It's like beating our heads against a wall. It doesn't work. You can't do it. If someone has expectations, our close ones, family members, have expectations for you, about how you're going to live, how they think you should live, it's going to be really, really difficult, if not impossible, to get them to let those go. They may stop talking to you about them. They may pretend that they don't have them because they don't want to make you upset. But they're not actually going to drop them on the inside. The only answer here is for you to deeply recognize that your dharma is not to fulfill someone else's expectations. We are not here on planet Earth to fulfill someone else's expectations. Even if you tried, you can't. Because of course it's not only one person who has expectations, there's at least 5, 10, 15 people, family members, friends, people in the office, people in society. I mean, everybody's got some idea of how you should think, how you should live, how you should dress, how you should behave, all of that. So you literally cannot keep everyone happy. One thinks you're too thin, one thinks you're too fat, one thinks you're working too hard, one thinks you're not working hard enough. I mean, you would drive yourself batty and not be successful at all if you actually try to fulfill these. So the only solution is to actually recognize, I'm not here for that. Obviously, I want to help people as much as I can. I want to serve as much as I can, bring joy and peace as much as we all can. But not by adapting my dharma to match their agenda. That is not what is being asked of us. So if someone has an expectation, let's say, that you get these in families a lot with parents, sort of, we've spent so much money on your education, we've done all of this now, like you better go out there, you better work yourself to the bone, you better make a whole bunch of money, you better be really successful, because that's that's what we expect, and because, we've done everything for you, therefore, you owe it to us, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the world. But what if really what you want to do is write poetry instead of do business? What if what you want to do is, teach inner city kindergarten for some NGO or some, local government school where there's barely enough money to, there's enough you're going to feed yourself, you're not going to starve, but you're certainly not going to become rich enough that the neighbors say to your parents, wow, God, what your child has become. Depending on who the family members are, if you're lucky, if you're really blessed, they're going to actually see the value in you fulfilling your dharma regardless of whether it ends up being what their expectation on that level was. But we're not all that lucky. A lot of times, remember, our parents are humans. And in that spectrum of humans, we're all at different levels of doing our own work and working through our own attachments and expectations and agendas and illusions and all of that. And so depending on where on this spectrum your parents are, they may say, wow, I'm so proud of you. I know it's not easy, but I'm so proud of you for having that courage to really live according to what you know is right, what you know you're meant to do. And I'm so proud of you for, living simply because that's what you need to do in order to have the job that you want. But you may not get that. You may get them saying, this is such a waste. You could do so much more. You're not fulfilling your potential. There's a very big misunderstanding in the world that potential equals money and power. When people say you're not fulfilling your potential, 99 times out of 100, it means you could be achieving, acquiring, earning more in the material world, the career world, than you are. No one says, God, you could be so much more spiritually deep than you are if you just meditated a little more. Wow, you could be so much more in touch with the beautiful truth of yourself if you just let go of some of those attachments. No one ever talks about our spiritual potential. The gurus do. But in society, we don't get that. In society, when people say your potential, live up to your potential, it essentially means work yourself to the bone, rise as high as you can, bring home as much as you can. And for some people, that is what they need to do to fulfill a dharma. But that's not true for all of us. And so when you're working with other people's expectations for you, make sure that you're really loyal, mostly, to your own dharma. You must be respectful of them, especially if they're your parents, deeply respectful, deeply grateful for everything they've given you, everything they've done for you. But sadly, just because people are biologically capable of conceiving and popping out children does not necessarily mean that they are spiritually awake and enlightened and wise and therefore qualified to tell you how to make every choice in your life. And so with reverence and care and gratitude, we may sometimes have to just realize, I respect you and love you, but my life is different. I know this is what I what I experienced. And my parents are deeply beautiful, deeply wise on so many levels, and really wanted the very best for me. They didn't have any of their own ulterior motivations or anything like that. But they just had visions that were based on their own life experiences, their own learnings, their own wisdom that was gleaned from what they had lived, what they had learned, what they had experienced. And in their minds, therefore, that which they were teaching me was absolutely the best thing for me. And it was until I came to India and had a completely different experience and found myself drawn to a dharma and a path that was completely different from anything that I'd ever expected, anticipated, been taught about. And when I finally told them, or told my mother, I had already kind of told my dad, he was much more open and accepting. Moms are moms. You know, moms have a different level of attachment, especially with their daughters. But she was very, very attached to sort of how I was going to live and how close to her I was going to live and, you know, the number of babies I was going to pop out and sort of all of that. And I remember when I told her that I was moving back to India, I actually did it via a letter. And because I thought it'll be easier. She'll digest the letter first and then we'll be able to have a calm conversation. And in the letter, I remember so vividly telling her, you know, I love you so much and I respect you so much and I respect your choices so much. And I know that your choices were absolutely the best choices for you. And that they are exactly the choices that have given you this beautiful life, this beautiful, fulfilling life that you have, that is so right for you. But I don't want to be you. And I remember telling her, you know, I say that with all the respect and love, but if you told me today, I was 25 at the time, so if you told me today that when I was 52, it's funny telling the story now because now I'm 52, but at the time I remember saying, if you told me that when I was 52, because Mom was 52 then, that was how I was going to be living my life, I can't even bear the thought of it. Like, that is so not where I want my life to go. And I said, you know, when I look at Pujya Swamiji, now I know that I could never actually achieve that in this lifetime, but at least I know that's the direction I want to go. And if I don't want to end up in the destination where you are, it means I can't take the same train. If I get on the same train, it's going to go to the same place. And so I have to get on a different train. And obviously I did my best to convey it with as much love and as much respect and as much gratitude as I could, because I felt that. I know that their lives are absolutely the very best, highest. I've got incredible respect for them, incredible gratitude. But I also knew that I was meant to live something different. And so if you find that that's the case, that someone has an expectation for you that isn't in alignment with what you feel inside is your truth or your dharma, then you need to stay true to yourself. And if they are evolved at all, as I was very blessed that my parents were, they will come around, they will understand. Ultimately, what they want, real loved ones, what they really want is that we should be happy, that we should be fulfilled. Not just happy on a superficial level, but they want that we should be deeply happy. They want that we should be deeply fulfilled, that our lives should be meaningful. And if you find that in a way that isn't what they thought, again, if they really love you and if they've got the courage to think outside their box, they will come around, but not everyone is in that situation. And so you've got to really just keep coming back to staying true to your own inner calling and be as loving as you can, as tender as you can, as gentle as you can, but simultaneously as fierce as you can in the protection of and the commitment to your own dharma and your own path. Because even though we have lots and lots and lots of lives and we keep coming back, you only get to do this one once. We don't get a repeat. We'll have different karmic lessons, a next life, a different situation. But we only get to do this one once. And so do it mindfully, do it consciously, do it courageously. You owe it to yourself. And again, if they're really loved ones, they'll come. They'll support you in whatever it may be. It just may take them a little while. Questions? Any questions anyone here has? Yes. Just come up, there's a microphone here.
Namaste. My question is why it is so difficult to be a devotee these days. I mean, when you're working in a corporate, there are people who will say, oh, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you're one of those. And I also want to know some practical tips from you. Because one day, your bhakti, you can feel the sweetness of it. And the other day, there is no sweetness. And you don't feel the same way. So are there any practical tips to feel the nectar of that bhakti that you are into?
Beautiful. So let's start with the second question. And then we'll move into the first question. That juice of bhakti, that ras that we talk about, sometimes it seems to flow, like we're just swimming in it. And then there's times, sadly, where it feels like it dries up. And what I've noticed in my life, and in the lives of so many people I've had the great blessing and privilege to be in conversation with, is that it dries up due to a few different things. And they're actually really quite simple things to take care of in our lives. Because the river of bhakti is still flowing. It's just that we stop feeling drenched in it. So it's not that we have to bring the river back. We just have to somehow get ourselves able to again drink, heaping mouthfuls of it. And the things that have kept me and so many of those I've worked with from that are, number one, being in a rush, being busy. When your mind is in 100 places, whether it's your kids, your spouse, or God, you tend to forget how much you love them. And it tends to become just business. It's like, eat your dinner, do your homework, who's going to pick up the laundry, who's going to take out the trash, and you forget, oh my God, I love these people so much. And the same thing happens with our relationship with God. The busier we get, the more in our minds we are, in our cerebral aspects, we are figuring things out, we are planning, we are checking items off of to-do lists. The world becomes sort of a task to be done. And in order to love, you've got to drop into the heart. And when we're busy and rushed, we're not in our hearts. And so to the extent that you can prevent yourself from getting so busy and rushed that you spend all day long in your head and you find it difficult to drop into your heart, you'll find that ras of bhakti there. Another thing that happens is we have expectations of God. And those expectations aren't always fulfilled. So maybe we are great devotees and we do our japa and we do our puja and we do our chanting and all of our prayers and everything. And then someone we love gets sick or dies, or we get fired from our job, or we go through a bad divorce, or our house burns down, or any one of innumerable things happens. And there's a sense inside us of, what's the point? God let me down. And so some of us take that in a, maybe God's not really there. Or, maybe God's not quite as nice as I thought God was. What's the point? And inevitably we find ourselves with, that distance. It's like, again, if a loved one, your best friend or your spouse or your child does something that hurts you. They lie to you, or they disobey you, or they, do something that feels like they've betrayed you in some way. Even if you still love them, you find it a lot more difficult to access that love. You look at them and you feel full of anger and disappointment and hurt, resentment. And the same thing happens with God. So we may sit down to engage in bhakti activities, but the mind may say, how dare you? You weren't there for me. So in that sense, the recognition and awareness that, as I always say, God isn't a vending machine, and that God just isn't there to give us what we want. God's not a genie in a bottle. We have these ideas that somehow a good connection with God is like the genie in the bottle. Like whatever I need, I'm just gonna rub it, and I'm gonna get whatever I want because I got this good connection with God. But it's not like that. And so to the extent that we can deepen our relationship with God, from the idea of the one who gives me what I want, to the deep experience of a supreme reality, then we're going to find ourselves less disappointed when what we wanted to happen doesn't happen. Another thing, and there's so many, but I'll just give you one more. Another thing that happens is on any path, there's moments of great movement and change. And then there's moments of what feels like stagnation, plateaus. And this is true on a spiritual life as well. On our spiritual path, in our practice, there are going to be times in which it just feels like we are getting deeper and deeper and deeper and closer, and every day is just more and more at us and more swimming in the ocean of God's love. And then suddenly we're at this like plateau thing, and it seems like nothing is moving. And it's really easy at those times to kind of give up or to get disillusioned, or to, decide that we have better things to do than meditate because nothing's going to happen in my meditation anyway. And the solution to that piece is just resilience. In knowing you keep going, you just keep going, and it'll shift. We speak a lot in here about seasons, and seasons with crops and plants and trees, and seasons in which they're very plentiful and productive, and then seasons where the land is fallow, or the tree has lost not only its fruit but its leaves, and how all of that is really part of nature. And the same thing happens a lot on our spiritual path. And it's just really important to stay resilient and to know that even though you can't necessarily feel God so much at that time, that God was there. It's like that beautiful story I love of the man who has a dream one night, and he's a great devotee of God, and he wakes up from this dream and he cries out to God and he says, God, I had this awful dream. And in my dream, I saw my footsteps of my life along the beach. And throughout most of my life, throughout most of the path, I saw there were two sets of footprints, mine and yours, because you were always with me. But then there were these moments that were the toughest moments of my life. And in those moments, there was only one set of footprints. And how is it possible that you abandoned me in those times, like when I needed you most? Where did you go? How could you have disappeared on me when I needed you so much? And God says, my child, I didn't go anywhere. Those were the times I carried you. That's why there was only one set of footprints. And so in those times in our lives where we metaphorically feel like it's just one set of footprints, where is God? To see if we can reframe it and just understand that even though we may not see God, feel God the way that we're used to, like right here next to me, when we have the bird's eye view of our life, that becomes the time that we're able to see, oh yeah, I was actually being carried. So that was your first question, or that was your second question, rather. And the first question was, remind me? About? Yes, of course. Right, yes, sorry. I got swept up in the river of love and devotion. So you're in corporate life, and it's not only corporate life, it's sophisticated, metropolitan, modern life. We see it also a lot in universities, colleges, especially with kids who have been protected or sheltered, and then they go off into university. And you get this sense of people saying, why don't you drink? Why don't you smoke? And what's wrong with you? So here's the thing about that, and this is what I always teach youth who are going off into university. But the exact same rule applies. People only criticize you or pressure you about doing something like drinking or smoking or eating when they themselves are actually a bit insecure about it. If I'm doing something that I really enjoy and I feel totally secure about it, no complex about it whatsoever, I may invite you to do it, offer for you to do it, but if you say no, that's not going to bother me. If we are out at a club and I love to dance, no complex about it, just I love to dance. I may say to you, hey, I'm going to go dance. You want to come dance? And if you say no, I may say one time, I don't want you to feel bad and sit all by yourself. I may say, yeah, come on, you'll enjoy it. If you say no, fine. It's not going to ruin my evening that you're sitting in the chair not dancing. I'll go, I'll dance, I'll have a good time. If you look really sad and bored, maybe after some time I'll come over and offer to you again, are you sure? But if I realize that you're sure, no issue. I'll dance, I'll have fun, you'll sit, you'll do your thing. It's not going to trouble me in any way. But if I'm doing something, like drinking or smoking or any other of the numerous things that we do that we get pressured to do by others that we really don't feel like we should be doing, if when I do that, I don't feel quite so sure about it, maybe there's a little voice in the back of my head saying you shouldn't be doing this, then I need you to do it in order for me to feel okay. Because if you sit back in that booth, totally sober, or, God forbid, you actually get up to dance sober, and actually are able to have a good time dancing sober, but I needed to get drunk or smoke something or take some drugs in order to get out here and dance and have a good time, well, then I'm going to need to keep pressuring you to have something. Because otherwise, your strength, your courage, your firmness, your anchoring in what you don't want to do, especially if you seem happy about it, well, that's going to really trouble me. Because then it means that that's like a mirror in my face about the fact that I might have actually had a choice or an option about whether to drink or smoke, and maybe I'm not quite so sure that I chose the right thing. If everybody is drinking, everybody's smoking, everybody's using drugs, then hey, everybody's doing it, nothing to think about. But if you're sitting over there drinking a Perrier, and I'm on my 4th tequila, and you're smiling and happy, that's going to bring up some issues for me. And so I'm going to try to deal with those issues by convincing you to have something. Because it's a lot easier for me to try to convince you that the problem is you than for me to actually look at myself and my choices. So whenever you find yourself being pressured, regardless of whether it's a corporate situation, a university situation, wherever it may be, friends, colleagues, classmates, the more someone tries to make you feel bad for what you're doing or not doing that has nothing to do with them whatsoever, the more you can be sure that they are not so confident in their own decision. And if you're looking for a sassy comeback, you could always try something like, well, God, you don't look like you're having so much fun over there if the fact that I'm not drinking is enough to take away your fun. Right? Like, how enjoyable could it be if my Perrier is enough to undo your high? And if you don't need a sassy reply, just sit there, keep drinking Perrier and smiling and saying, really, I'm good. I'm happy with my brain chemistry exactly the way it is. But just recognize that they are pushing because they're not quite settled. Wonderful. Any other questions? Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining us online from all over the world. And so much love to all of you.